Have you ever been told the all too familiar phrases, "My childhood was better than yours," or "The music of the 80s is far better than what's on the radio today"? These feelings continue to convey to those who relate to them the feeling that human beings feel every single day, the feeling of nostalgia. To begin, I would like to ask you all a question, but this question isn't to be answered yet. Is there an object or person in your life who triggers nostalgia? To define nostalgia is defined as the overall need and wishes of human beings to return to a past period in time that conveys a certain emotion or feeling within us, and how this affects our overall development and our future endeavors. This nostalgia isn't always cut and dry to this definition. You could experience nostalgia without even realizing it. Like, have you ever seen any of these movie or TV show posters? I'm sure you all have. I'm also sure when you saw these, it brought you back to a memory that could have been recent or old, but nevertheless, a memory. Now, these memories are all individual to you, memories that are put into your own perspective, memories that make you feel a specific emotion. According to an article discussing how nostalgia works, nostalgia-related activity mainly happens in the hippocampus, the ventral stramonium, and the substantia nigral ventral tegmental area. This rare ability that nostalgia has to not only trigger the hippocampus, which if you don't know, is the memory storage part of the brain, but also trigger the ventral stramonium in charge of the motor skill and reward system part of the brain, but also even trigger the nigral ventral system, which is the source of dopamine release. You wouldn't think this is all happening in your brain when nostalgia is occurring. There you go. Brains are some amazing places, let me tell you that. Now I'm going to play a 5-second video clip for you. If you're comfortable, please close your eyes. After, I'm going to ask you all if you can give me, if anyone can give me one word that they thought of when you heard this sound. Okay. Would anyone like to volunteer? Olivia.
Childhood.
Riley.
Friendship.
Anyone else? Okay.
Siblings.
So I thought of this clip as a perfect example of because I know this was a big part of everyone's childhood. I also was hoping that this either made you think of something like hanging out with your childhood best friend or possibly being with your family. So when we're nostalgia is as of course good for reflection, but it's also good for when we're in times of sadness and depression. Many humans turn to nostalgia as a way for comfort. According to an article on why we reach for nostalgia in times of crisis, as a way to cope during times of distress, our brains often take us to places we subconsciously designate as safe, like past memories. Nostalgia provides humans a way to feel comfort in the world when we are dealing with things in the present day that make us feel helpless or even alone. In a study found this year in the journal Frontier, researchers found that nostalgia can help us combat feelings of loneliness, which is a universal feeling that all human beings feel, and of course helps give us comfort. In an article, Melinda Drake, 34, discusses a thing she does with her husband to appreciate her time with her family. She and her husband, she added, have been enjoying movie nights of old 80s movies. I know Full House is not a movie, but I had to add it because it's a good show. Having even more time than before to play board games, such as Life, and talk about our past, and share some of our memories that are children. And this sense of reflection and connection is a very impactful part of nostalgia. Now, an experience that I had when I was little was one day I remember asking my parents about where they grew up, and I wanted to know more. So I would ask them questions such as, where'd you grow up? What school did you go to? What's the area like you lived in? So one day they drove me down to Rockland County, where they both grew up, and they showed me things that reminded them of childhood. And this really taught me a lot about who they are as people and why they are the way they are today. And this sense of reflection and connection, as I said before, is a very impactful part of nostalgia. So throughout the world, the idea of nostalgia is on a rapid rise. And you may be thinking, how could a common function of the brain be on the rise? Well, according to the article, Why Nostalgia is on the Rise, the New York Times last year reported that old technology is selling at a rapid clip. People are once again snapping Polaroids and adopting Tamagotchis. And a lot of this is to do to the recent political division throughout the United States, as we all know, and COVID-19. So according to the Medium, there's also this concept of called the 30-year cycle, or the nostalgia pendulum. It's basically the idea that popular trends from the past resurface every 30 years. And these things that get resurfaced are things such as trends, movies, and objects. So an example is the bucket hat that was originally popular in the 80s but resurfaced in the early 2010s. The Lion King that was originally released in 1994 but was re-released as a live-action movie, even though it was a little scary looking. And then the Rubik's Cube that was originally popular in the 80s and regained popularity in the 2010s. And this is not because society can't create new things, but more the fact that we hold on to the past as a society and it as a way to comfort and for nostalgic reasons. So, as I had talked about, there are obviously a lot of positives to do with nostalgia, but there's also a vast amount of negatives. The article, Why Do We Need Nostalgia, discusses that in a study, it was declared that nostalgia can be seen as a mental illness in many cases. For much of the 20th century, some psychologists viewed nostalgia as an immigrant psychosis, a mentally repressive compulsive disorder, or a regressive manifestation closely related to the issue of loss, grief, mourning, and finally depression. And as the nostalgia is an incredibly abusive thing to human beings by stimulating all these to happen. So when looking back at our past, we also tend to leave the unsavory memories related to a positive one out. According to Why Nostalgia is on the Rise, it states, there's a problem with nostalgia. It only tells us half-truths. We often remember the sweet things about a particular era, conveniently forgetting about the bitter aspects. A great example that the article used to display this was African Americans in the 1950s and 60s, where they were treated with discrimination and racism. And for white individuals during that time, it might have been a time of prosper or a time of change. So it's all about perspective. Another one is the shell shock in World War I, where many soldiers experienced trauma by being in the barricades, and this was also a time for many people who weren't fighting in the war to experience a lot of prosper and a lot of change in technology and just the world in itself. And what caused many of these soldiers developed something known as PTSD, which is also known as post-traumatic stress disorder, which is when a person has difficulty recovering after experiencing or witnessing a terrifying event, but others could think of that memory very fondly. And this is more why there's such a great division in looking back, and it can be extremely divisive based on how the time treated you and how the past had treated you. Yeah. So there, as we see, there's clear evidence on both sides, and I want to leave you with one quote. We should all leave with one quote by Mark Kennedy after the removal of his murals from Affleck's Palace in Manchester, England. Nostalgia is the death of hope. Let's all continue to look forward and leave the past behind. And I want to remind you of the question I asked at the beginning of the TED Talk. After listening to this TED Talk, did your object or person in your life who triggers nostalgia change? I also want to leave you with this. In a few years, we will all look back at this moment where we created our TED Talks, and the moment where we finally unlocked the keys to our diplomas. Our final keys to adulthood and our final keys to our future. One day, this will all just simply be memories. Thank you.